Have you ever heard someone say, I feel lonely, even though I have hundreds of friends on social media? It's something we hear a lot these days among young people because there's a real gap between virtual connection and meaningful connection. And maybe it's in face-to-face conversations where we really build those bonds of trust and where we can open up and be vulnerable. But when our communication happens mostly through text messages or apps like Messenger, that depth often gets lost. Even the statuses we post are carefully curated to show only what we choose to reveal. In today's episode, we're diving into emotional tools for young people navigating a changing world. I'm Shirley Yegatega, and I'm here with Tamara Aguilar.
Thank you, Shirley, for the invitation to be part of this beautiful podcast. It's a chance for us to also reconnect with our own youth and talk with young people about things that truly matter. Like you mentioned, it's so important to stay present, even with all the technology and new tools around us. The world is constantly changing, right? And to get us started, I'd love to ask you this. If you could share a few strategies or relaxation techniques with teenagers who are feeling overwhelmed, maybe because of societal pressure or constant changes, what would you recommend?
Well, I think there are actually two techniques that I really like and have personally practiced. One of them is the 4-7-8 breathing technique. You inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 7 seconds, and then slowly exhale for 8 seconds. I think it's really important to emphasize that this type of breathing helps calm the body. You see, when we're stressed, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. It's what puts us on high alert. For example, blood flows to the extremities, so we're ready to fight, run, or defend ourselves. But when we start breathing more slowly and intentionally, our body begins to calm down. And that's when the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. It helps us relax. So those racing thoughts and that inner restlessness we were feeling start to ease up and settle down. So I think this breathing technique is really powerful. And the second one I'd recommend for young people is called progressive muscle relaxation. It's a method that focuses on gently tensing and then relaxing different muscle groups throughout the body. We can start by clenching our fists and really noticing how the tension releases. In our hands, our toes, even our arms. As we go through each muscle group, we start to feel that release. And that helps trigger the release of hormones like endorphins and neurotransmitters like serotonin. All of that helps us feel calmer and better overall. And Tamara, I've actually experienced this myself with my daughter. It feels a little vulnerable to share, but my little girl is 5 years old, and she's been really eager to start school. But now that she's finally there, she's been crying all week, not wanting to stay in class, wanting to come back home, wanting to be with her sister and with me. Back then, I was really worried about my daughter. I turned to the teacher and asked, "What do I do?" And the teacher responded, well, you're the parent. What do you think? And then she looked at me and said, "But you're the psychologist. What are you going to do?" And I thought, you're right. So we began trying different strategies. But the one that stood out the most and that even my 5-year-old recognized as something important was breathing. Simple, intentional breathing. She would carry her comfort object, something that made her feel safe, and she'd hold it tightly while we practiced breathing on the way to school. And as we walked, we just kept breathing together. I also love playing binaural sounds during that time, those gentle tones that alternate between one ear and the other. They really help create a sense of calm and relaxation. Our brain interprets that combination as a signal of calm. And little by little, those anxious thoughts she was having, like not wanting to be at school, not liking it, or feeling afraid to be alone, started to fade away. She started feeling more confident, calmer, more positive, that mindset we're aiming for, right? And that's when I realized she was really adapting, going through her own process. It's normal for kids to face these situations. But one day, because we were in a rush, we skipped the breathing exercise I completely forgot. And later that day, she came to me and said, "Mom, I had tears in my eyes today." And that happened because we skipped the breathing exercise. And that touched me deeply. It showed me that even at 5 years old, she was already recognizing the power of breathing, how it helps calm the nervous system, and how it makes a difference. Honestly, I can say that these relaxation techniques are so important to practice daily, not just when we feel stressed, but as part of our routine, especially when we or young people around us are struggling with negative thoughts, whether about themselves, their surroundings, or what they're going through. Now, Tamara, I'd love to ask you this. If you could go back and be a teenager again, what advice would you give yourself? What would you say or do to open up and ask your parents for help? How would you start that conversation?
Thank you. I think it's so valuable to revisit that stage of life, to look back and ask, what was my teenage experience like emotionally? And I think the first thing I would tell my younger self is learn to trust your parents. So often we feel like they don't get us, that they don't understand what we're going through. But many times they want to help. They just don't know how unless we let them in. And that's when we slowly start to lose trust in them. Especially because when we try to talk to our parents, we often feel that there's judgment behind their words, like they're going to criticize us or question our choices. And that can really hold us back. We end up thinking, maybe it's better not to tell dad, better not to tell mom about that. But the truth is, there are so many things happening in a teenager's life that really do need to be shared with their parents. And maybe I'd also tell my teenage self, seek out those little moments when you can approach your parents. Don't be afraid to ask them for a chance to talk. It's important to find the right time, to ask for help, and to try to truly connect. Our parents are usually the ones who love us the most, the ones who want the best for us. And sometimes, the advice we receive from them is something we won't hear from anyone else. It comes from a place of deep love and life experience. Let's remember, it comes from deep love and life experience. Now, as a mom of a teenager myself, I realize how easy it is to forget what it felt like to be that age. We want to protect our children from pain, frustration, sadness, from anything that could leave a mark. But as parents, I believe we have to learn to judge less and listen more. I truly value those natural, unplanned moments of connection, like when we're sitting around the dinner table, just talking about our day. Those casual conversations often lead to deeper ones. And the foundation for all is trust. That's something young people can build with their parents. That would be my invitation to every young person listening. Work on building that trust. Because it really makes all the difference.
That's true. You reminded me of something my dad used to say to me, get in the car. And I already knew what was coming. One of those talks that started with, you need to do better, you're not doing things right. But that makes me think sometimes if parents don't take the first step, young people can be the ones to ask. Like you said earlier, take the initiative and say, can we talk? One really important topic that often gets overlooked is sexuality. And sadly, many teens turn to the wrong sources to get that information. But who better to talk to than our own parents, right? Of course, sometimes even parents aren't sure how to begin those conversations, how to approach the topic in a way that feels natural and respectful. Thankfully, the church offers some wonderful resources for this. In the Gospel Library under Life Help, there's a section dedicated to teaching about sexuality by age group with guidance on what topics to address, how deep to go, and how to approach it in a gospel-centered way.
And speaking of helpful tools, I also want to mention a resource we helped create. You can find it in the Family Services section on the church's website for Central America. The link appears right here below. It includes short comics with relatable and friendly examples that can help young people start those conversations with their parents. So, we invite you to check it out. And since we're already talking about the internet and digital tools, Shirley, I'd love to ask you, what would you recommend when it comes to developing healthy habits in the digital age?
Well, it's important to set boundaries, clear limits around how and when we use our devices. For example, designating specific spaces where phones are simply not allowed can be a great start. What kind of places? Well, ideally, the dining room. Let's put our phones away while we're eating. That's a time to connect, to talk as a family, and phones can really get in the way of that. Another moment where we could practice this is during sacrament meetings. That's sacred time to reflect, to feel the Spirit. So putting the phone aside in moments like that can help us stay more present. It also helps to set time limits. Maybe you decide Today, I'll only use my phone for 6 hours, or I'll take a break from screens for 1 hour in the afternoon. It doesn't have to be drastic, just intentional. And the point is to have regular moments of digital disconnection. Sometimes there are family rules like only 2 or 3 hours a day of screen time, and that's great. But what matters most is, what am I choosing to do? As a young person, how am I managing my own time with technology? That's where we start to mature, when we realize that disconnecting from social media isn't a punishment. It's actually something that brings us peace. When we're not constantly watching videos or playing games, we start to notice how much better we feel. And that's where real balance begins.
I think what you just said, Shirley, is so important. The idea of pausing to really assess the impact technology is having on us. As a teenager, it's powerful to realize, hey, this is affecting me, but I can also do something about it. That's where self-help strategies come in. It reminds me of something President Nelson once said to the youth. And I think it ties in beautifully with what we're talking about today. He invited them to take charge of your own testimony. And why would the prophet of God give young people that kind of invitation? Because it means you can. You're at an age where you have the capacity to reflect on what's helping you and what's not. And you can start taking responsibility for those things. So that would be our invitation to you today. Start taking ownership of the things that matter in your life. Your self-esteem, your spiritual growth, even your screen time. Ask yourself, how much time am I really spending on my phone? Is it affecting my grades, my sleep, my relationships? And what can I do about it? All those tips are tools, practical steps that can help you feel more balanced, more at peace.
Something else that we don't always talk about, but it's real, is the physical impact of being on our phones all the time. Poor posture, staying seated for hours, it leads to back pain, sore arms and hands, especially in the fingers. It takes a toll. This overuse also fuels a sedentary lifestyle. How many young people spend hours sitting, barely moving, completely absorbed in their phones? So today, we want to lovingly invite you, our young listeners, to become more aware of the negative effects that come from not having healthy habits with technology. And also, maybe you've heard about something called FOMO.
Yes, the fear of missing out. President Nelson recently talked about it. In a message to the youth, he said that today we live in this constant fear of missing something, a funny video, a meme, some news, a new trend. That's why we scroll endlessly, afraid to look away. But he also gave us a powerful challenge. What if we were more afraid of missing out on the real things happening in front of us? What if we feared missing out on the blessings that come from being present, from living the gospel, from being connected to the people we love? So maybe it's time to shift our focus. Let's not just fear missing out on what's online. Let's pay attention to what we could be missing in our homes, in our classrooms, in our prayers, and in our hearts.
You know what I'd really love for us to talk about now? Self-compassion. I think it's something young people really need to develop today. What kind of things do you recommend they could do or put into practice to start nurturing self-compassion?
One of the first steps is to put things into perspective, to pause and really reflect on the situations we're going through. When we talk about self-compassion, it's because we're facing something hard. Maybe we've made a mistake, or we're going through a challenge that's weighing on us. And in those moments, being kind to ourselves is essential. There's a strategy I often use for myself and also recommend to my patients, especially when I notice they're being too hard on themselves. You know, those moments when the inner critic is loud and harsh, when we start blaming ourselves for everything, and we forget to show any understanding or grace. What I ask them to do is to imagine that the mistake or struggle didn't happen to you, but to someone you love deeply. It could be a friend, a sibling, or even your younger self. And then ask yourself, what would I say to that person? How would I comfort them? What words would I use to lift them up and help them feel understood? That shift, seeing the situation from the outside, helps us soften the voice of judgment and practice kindness toward ourselves.
Exactly.
And part of that exercise is learning to speak to ourselves with compassionate words. So now, the challenge is to turn that same kindness inward. Speak to yourself with love, with respect, with gentleness.
And it's not just about words. Gestures also matter. There are self-compassionate gestures we often use with others, like giving someone a pat on the back and saying, "Hey, everything's going to be okay," or gently rubbing their arm and saying, "Take it easy, you've got this." But how often do we do those things for ourselves? We rarely give ourselves a hug. We almost never pause and place a hand on our chest or say something like, "We're going to get through this. I'm doing my best." Those small gestures, as simple as they seem, are powerful. They send a message of safety and support to our own brain and heart.
And speaking of this, have you seen the walls of acceptance? They're such a beautiful way to start working on self-esteem and recognizing our value. Yes, and I think it's important to clarify something. Self-acceptance doesn't mean thinking we're the most beautiful person in the world or the best at everything. That's a common misconception. Real self-acceptance means treating ourselves with dignity and kindness, even when we feel we're not enough. And self-compassion plays a huge role in that process. That reminds me of something when we talk about self-image. Especially during adolescence, so many things can affect how we see ourselves. And sometimes we carry those judgments for years. Shirley, I'm going to take you back to your teenage years for a second. Do you remember making any mistake related to your self-image back then?
Well, when it comes to self-image, as teens we go through phases. One thing I remember is messing with my hair, making very questionable hair decisions, thinking it would help me fit in or feel prettier, and looking back, wow. Back then I had a lot of negative and irrational thoughts about my hair. I really wanted straight hair. I had fallen into that all or nothing kind of thinking. Straight hair was beautiful, manageable, elegant, and curly hair was just the opposite. Wild, messy, and problematic.
I remember thinking about that.
And so much frizz, it was constant. And because of that, I started rejecting even the compliments. People would say, "Oh, your hair is so beautiful." And deep down, I didn't believe it. I couldn't see what they saw. And I'm sure a lot of young people go through something similar. They wrestle with their self-image, and whether it's their hair, their skin, their body type. Even something like acne can deeply affect the way they feel about themselves. And now we know that body dysmorphia is becoming more and more common. It's a real issue. Many teens are struggling because they focus so much on small details or imperfections that they lose sight of the bigger picture, the beauty and purpose of their bodies as a whole. Self-acceptance is so vital. Looking back, I wish that as a teenager, I had focused more on caring for my hair rather than trying to change it. If I had understood that nourishing and protecting it was more valuable than forcing it to look a certain way, even using damaging tools or products, maybe I would have developed a more loving relationship with myself much earlier. But it's in those moments, those honest, vulnerable moments, when you can pause and say, "No, I actually love my body. I truly love it just as it is, and I'm grateful to have it." Because think about it. How many people would give anything to have hair, or to move freely, to have their limbs, to feel health in their body? So yes, body image is a real concern, especially during adolescence, but there are ways to work through it with kindness and perspective. It starts with choosing self-acceptance, really tuning in and connecting with each part of our body, being grateful for what it allows us to feel and experience.
Body dysmorphia is a serious issue. It's more than disliking a feature or two. It's a constant fixation and deep dissatisfaction with one's appearance. It becomes a constant fixation, often leading to an urge to change or control how the body looks. And we need to say it clearly. That's not healthy. When that kind of obsession takes over, it starts affecting our mental health in powerful and painful ways. But here's something hopeful. We can shift our mindset. We can start showing our bodies the same kindness we show to others. We can learn to receive compliments without brushing them off. We can accept them with humility, grace, and even gratitude. But thank you for offering us such relatable and honest experiences.
Totally. And now let's move into another topic that's also affecting people, especially youth, and that's misinformation. It's truly a serious concern. Today we're flooded with content everywhere we turn, reels, videos, articles, stories. And yes, some of it is helpful and informative, but a lot of it's misleading. It's not based on facts, and in many cases, it can even be dangerous. That's why I'd really love to hear from your perspective. As a professional, how have you seen misinformation evolve over time?
Yes, definitely. Misinformation is one of the biggest challenges we face today. It's connected to body dysmorphia because we have to ask, what kind of content or messages are we consuming that are convincing us that our bodies aren't enough? There's a massive amount of content online. Videos, reels, posts. Some of it has genuinely good intentions or even helpful ideas. But often, that content lacks proper context or is shared without any verification. And if we're not careful, we can fall into the trap. And that's where it gets dangerous, because we begin to internalize that information. We start to believe it's true, adopt it into our worldview, without knowing its source, its background, or if it's even accurate. And this isn't just happening to young people, adults fall into this too. So we're all exposing ourselves. This is a big shift from how things used to be back then. If we wanted to learn more about something, we'd go to the library. Where the source of truth felt more solid, it came from books, had authors, citations, references. That's why we want to invite all young people, and honestly, everyone, to seek out trustworthy sources. As members of the church, we've been given access to reliable spiritual and emotional resources that are based on truth. Because yes, Satan can and does use technology to confuse, to distort, and to subtly twist what's true and what's not. And you brought up something important: technostress. Technostress is what happens when we feel the need to be connected all the time. Hyper-connected. It's the stress caused by constant technology use. It's real. And we already mentioned FOMO, that fear of missing out.
And then there's something called doom screening or doom scrolling, which is when we're constantly scrolling through bad news. Maybe we follow certain pages or accounts that only share tragic or dramatic events, and before we even realize it, we're hooked. We're looking to see if there was another accident, another conflict, bad news, and that keeps us in a state of stress and tension.
It becomes a habit, even an addiction. And the tricky part is that we often subject ourselves to it voluntarily. No one's forcing us to stay stuck on these screens or feed ourselves that kind of content. We choose it, maybe without realizing the impact it's having on our thoughts and emotions. And that brings us to another big issue: cyberbullying. That's the hate we see online every day. Just open the comment section of any video, even one with a positive message, and you'll almost always find people criticizing, attacking, or mocking. And sometimes that negativity is so intense, so constant, that it deeply affects the people involved. That's why I love what the prophet invited us to do. He reminded us to be peacemakers. And that includes how we speak online. Are my comments building others up? Am I contributing to peace or to division? We can each make a choice every time we interact online. Because even if someone shares a good action, a kind gesture, there will always be people ready to criticize it. But we can shift the tone and choose to be part of the change society needs. And I'm glad we're taking the time to talk about this today.
Yes, and now that we're talking about all this, I remembered something I saw in one of those viral videos. It had to do with grooming. This happens when an adult pretends to be another child or teen online. There was one case, for example, where a girl was playing Roblox and ended up sharing her address with someone she thought was another child. But it turned out to be an adult man, and he actually showed up at her house. Thankfully, her mother was there and stopped everything, but it was a close call. It's frightening to see how far this can go. That's why awareness and prevention are key.
And this kind of content is sometimes normalized. One day I was watching a popular series, and in one of the episodes, the situation was reversed. A young boy gave his address to an adult woman through an online game, but the show presented it as something humorous. The woman arrived, realized he was a child, and instead of reporting it, the storyline turned into helping the boy get a makeover so she could have a real boyfriend. That shocked me. Because when we portray these situations in a positive or funny light, we're blurring lines and minimizing the danger. So we have to be alert to the content we consume, and as parents or caring adults, take an active role in supervising what young people are exposed to.
Absolutely. And now, as we start to wrap up, let's share a couple of tips for youth, things they can begin doing today to protect themselves and improve their well-being.
Yes, I actually love that idea. And one of the first things I'd share is the importance of gratitude. With so much negativity around us from news, social media, or even our own inner dialogue, we sometimes lose sight of the good. That's why I recommend a daily practice. Write down things you're grateful for. Just 3 things, every day. It can be something big or small, the weather, a kind word, a goal you reached. This habit helps shift our focus. Instead of constantly complaining or getting swept up in negativity, we begin to train our minds to see what's positive and uplifting. Is the belief I have around this thought helping me move forward? Or is it holding me back? And with that same habit, you may also notice some negative thoughts that come up. That's okay. What matters is what we do with them. One powerful tool is to challenge those thoughts. Ask yourself, is this thought rational? Is it based on truth? These moments of reflection can make a difference in how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. So, that's my invitation. Practice gratitude and challenge your thoughts. Both are small but powerful steps.
Such a powerful tip, because not every thought we have is true. We must question our thoughts. And you know what? Another tip I'd add is to pay attention to the physical signals our body sends things. like hunger and fullness. As teens, we often ignore these. We get busy, we skip meals, or we overeat without noticing. But those signals matter. If we start ignoring them often, it can lead to eating problems or unhealthy habits. That's why it's so important to listen to our body, and if we're not sure how to handle it, talk to someone we trust. Talk to your parents. Ask for support. That's a great tip you shared earlier, having open conversations at home. Also, let's talk about what we're exposed to online, especially on social media. Sometimes the people we follow can make us feel like we're not enough, or that we have to look a certain way to be accepted. So here's another invitation. Be mindful of who you follow. Choose content that uplifts you, not content that pressures you. That's my final tip today. Take care of what you allow into your mind and heart. What we consume online affects how we feel. Let's choose wisely. And overall, I just want to encourage every young person listening to keep growing, keep learning, and keep taking care of yourself. Today, we talked about so many valuable tools: emotional self-care, digital wellness, body image, and more. All of these tools can strengthen us and help us live with more confidence, more peace, and, like the prophet said, with real hope for the future. You really can build a beautiful life. And with that, we'll wrap up this conversation. We hope it's the beginning of all of you applying these tips. Any final words you'd like to add?
Yes, I'd love to share 2 more tips. Things I really wish I had paid more attention to when I was younger. First, please remember this. Your mistakes do not define you. They're part of life. They're how we grow. And adolescence, especially, is a time when we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're all still figuring life out, navigating uncertainties, learning as we go, and sometimes that means making impulsive or imperfect decisions. That's a natural part of being human. What truly matters isn't that we made a misstep, but how we respond afterward, with self-awareness, with accountability, and with the willingness to grow. We need to practice self-compassion, like we talked about earlier, and remind ourselves, I am not my mistake. God doesn't define us by our mistakes either. Jesus Christ doesn't look at us and say, you failed, so you're done. No, they see our potential, and they know we're learning. I would like to share a quote I love from Elder Uchtdorf. He said something like, what would you do if you saw a little baby learning to walk and they fell? Would you say, don't try again? You're not good at this? No, of course not. You'd cheer them on. You'd say, come on, get up, you've got this. You'd encourage them with love. And that's how Heavenly Father sees us. Like His little children, learning to walk through life. That image brings so much peace, doesn't it? Which leads me to my second tip. Practice positive affirmations. Speak kindly to yourself. I remember once, I was having a tough day, and a dear friend looked at me and said, don't forget your affirmations. Speak them out loud. So I did. And it helped me shift my perspective and feel grounded again. I'm capable. I've prepared for this. I've spent years studying and growing, all to build a good future. I am a daughter of God. These kinds of affirmations, true, powerful words, are something I can repeat to myself, and they can help young people too. Thank you for letting us share these strategies today. We have really enjoyed talking to you all, and thank you to those who are willing to listen.
You're right, this has been such a delightful time. And you know, youth is the time when we make some of the most important decisions of our lives. So one final tip, and with this I believe we can truly close, is before making a big decision, take a breath. Imagine yourself living the consequences of that choice. Ask yourself, how will this impact me and those around me? That moment of reflection can change everything. We hope that stays in your heart. Thank you for being with us, for listening, for giving yourself this time to grow and reflect. We're so grateful we could share this space with you. Well, we've talked about real tools to help young people navigate a changing world so they can live with more confidence and more purpose. Thank you all, and until next time.